Okay, so I did a video on an overview of contracts, but I wanted to I wanted to do a quick video on the creation of contracts. Okay, and so we're just going to label this side the buyer. Okay, we're going to label it a B for buyer, and we're going to label this side an S for seller. And so when we are buyer sees a property, and we'll have an agent here. And we'll even have a person with the power of attorney. And then on the other side, the seller also has an agent, and the seller also has somebody who acts as power of attorney. Okay, so buyer goes and looks at the property, makes an offer. Okay? And this offer is for $215,000. All right, we have no contract yet. We just have an offer. In fact, the agent writes up the offer for the buyer signs it, sends it back to the agent sends it over to the other agent. I shouldn't have had to go to the seller, I should have had to go to the agent here. Okay, in fact, we're gonna change that just to make it more appropriate. And it goes from agent to agent. The agent sends it to the seller, and let's say the seller signs it. Congratulations. But do we have a contract yet? And the answer is no, we do not have a contract because communication of acceptance has not been sent back. Let's turn it blue. And so we're going to go from the seller to the listing agent. Now, is it a contract? Because the seller communicated to the listing agent that they've accepted. And the answer is still no contract, because it has to be communicated back to the buy side. Now, as soon as this agent receives it, it is considered a binding contract because we had the offer, the acceptance, right? The offer, the acceptance, and the communication of the acceptance. That becomes a contract. So, let's talk through some other scenarios. So what if, oh, I don't want smart drawing. Turn that off. So what if we have the seller counteroffer? So he does not sign. He's like, nope, I don't like that. I'm going to counteroffer. And in fact, when he counteroffers the exact same price. And so it's still $215. But this, we wanted a general warranty deed. And the seller's not willing to do a general warranty deed. The seller's only willing to do a limited warranty deed. And so the answer here is we don't have a contract. And in fact, let's say that the buyer says, no, we're not going to do that. We really want that general warranty deed. The seller cannot at this time go and sign the original offer, because when the seller said no to that and put in a counteroffer, they declined and rejected that offer. That offer no longer exists. The seller cannot go back and sign it. Okay? The seller cannot go back and sign it. All right. Let's talk through a couple more things here. So the buyer sends over an offer to the agent. Sorry, I needed to knock that out. There we go. The buyer sends over an offer to the agent, and it's for $215,000. and it has a time limit of the offer till 1 p.m. tomorrow. Okay? Or the following day. And the seller signs it, and let's say the seller signs it at 2 p.m. the next day, gets it to their agent, and then their agent communicates back to the buyer's agent. Do we have a contract? Because the seller agreed to the price. But here's the thing, we have to have a mutual assent or mutual agreement on every point of the contract. And so since he didn't send it over until 2 p.m. the next day and it expired at 1 p.m., we don't have a contract. This is a void contract. Now, in real life, as long as the buyer hasn't found something else or something else is going on, we will typically just get that worked out, do the paperwork that we need to do to make it a binding offer. But it doesn't, basically by the seller not getting it returned on time, it's not a binding offer. I'll give you an example of one that happened to me in real life. So basically, buyer sent over an offer. Again, it would be the buyer's agent. Let me undo that. So agent sent the offer to the buyer signs it, sends it back to the agent sends it over to the other agent sends it to the seller. Now, here's the thing. The offer was great. It was around $450,000. And this is during the time where you could not get a refrigerator to save your life. And my seller, because this is my deal, my seller was building a home and needed the refrigerator. So we sent a counter back. And the counter back basically just said, hey, we'll take this $450, but no fridge. Everything but the fridge we agreed to. And I had already talked to the buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent said, yeah, that won't be a problem. And we had expiration of 1 p.m., and the 1 p.m. was on a Monday morning. Now, I was at another closing on that Monday morning, and the closing was supposed to happen at 10. We ran into a lot of issues, and so I'm driving home. Okay, I'm driving home at about 4:30 in the afternoon when I receive a call from another agent that had put in an offer. Okay. Another agent had put in an offer for their buyer. And they didn't win because they weren't the highest. And the agent called me and said, hey, did you guys go under contract with the offer that you thought you were going to? And I said, look, I haven't been home all day. I'm driving home now. We had verbal agreement. I'm expecting it to be in my inbox when I get home. But she's like, well, I'm going to go ahead and send the offer over. So she had her buyer sign it. Buyer signs it, sends it over to that agent, and sends it up to my seller. And it is $465,000, which is $15,000 more. Still no fridge. All the other terms are to my seller's liking, but the seller's going to make $15,000 more. So I get home, and this agent had sent everything over actually about an hour before I got home. It came over at 4 p.m. Okay. It came over at 4 p.m. And so we don't have a contract because the expiration of that counteroffer was 1 p.m. Monday. You responded at 4 p.m. We do not have a contract. And I called my seller and I said, hey, we got the response from, the buyer. They agreed to everything, but they didn't send it to us until 4. We're not under contract. And I have to let you know that we've got another offer that is $15,000 more. By the way, guys, I would have to have told him that offer no matter what. And it kind of sucks sometimes when you're under contract and you get a better offer, but it's going to happen. It just happens. All right. Now, here's the deal. My seller says, okay, we're not going to move forward with this one. We're going to move forward with this one. So we sign it, we send it back. Now we are good to go. We are binding on this deal right here. I had to call this agent, and she was super pissed. She was super upset And she said, well, we had verbal agreement and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, I understand. Verbal agreement doesn't mean anything. Okay. And you had until 1 p.m. And she's like, well, I was busy this morning. That's a really, really bad excuse, by the way. Try going back and telling your buyer that they didn't get their house because you were busy that morning. That's not going to be a fun conversation. That is not going to be a fun conversation. So when I'm on the sell side, I always want to set a reasonable but not too long response time because I want them to move forward with it. Okay. Now I'll give you another example that often trips people up. We're just going to delete everything here. And we're going to start with a buyer again. We've got a buyer, we've got an agent, we have a second buyer and a second agent, and we have the seller and me. All right, buyer goes and looks at the property, signs an offer. We have the property listed for $775. Just to let you know, list price here. Agent sends me an offer for $750,000. Call and present it to my seller. My seller wants us to counter at $765,000. I think that's the correct number. So $765,000. And again, we give that agent until 1 p.m. on a Sunday. Now, while this is going on, this agent is showing it to their buyer. And the agent had called me and said, do you have any other offers? I said, yes, we've got another offer and we're in negotiations, but we're not under contract yet. And this agent sends us an offer for $785,000. $10,000 more than our list price. Call my buyer, or my seller, I should say. And I say, hey, his name's David. Hey, David, we just got another offer for $785,000. Would you want to move forward with that one? And he's like, well, what's going on with the other one? Well, they haven't responded yet. And if you want to move forward with this one, what I'll do is I will rescind our counter offer and we can move forward with the $785,000 offer. And so we rescinded the counter offer. Obviously, the seller has to sign. All of these decisions are the seller's, not mine. I'm just there to advise and counsel. And so the seller says yes, fills out the rescission paperwork. We pull that offer back and we sign and go under contract with a $785,000 offer. Okay? Now, this agent was super pissed because she called me and said, you can't just rescind an offer. You have to wait until the offer expires, and my buyers were going to accept that offer. And that is not factually accurate at all. Okay? That is not factually accurate at all. Either party, buyer or seller, can rescind an offer at any time up until the point where the other party accepts the offer and communicates acceptance. Okay? They have to accept the offer and communicate acceptance. And if they haven't done that, okay, the buyer could have even signed it. And actually, that's what the agent said. She said, the buyer's already signed it, but I went out last night and I was just going to do it this morning. Okay, I'm sorry. Your buyer doesn't get to buy the house because we got this offer and we rescinded our counteroffer to you. Okay. And again, what's interesting is people in our industry, real estate professionals, sometimes don't know how contracts actually work. And they've been through this class. They should know, right? All right. Now, one other concept that I think a lot of students have a little bit of a challenge with, and I'm just going to use buyer and seller here to simplify it. Buyer sends an offer to the seller. The seller signs the offer, and we'll just say, we'll put a number on it just so that we can have a number on it. And and the seller signs the offer and then mails it back. Okay. Mails it back. And the question you could get is, when is the contract binding? And the contract is binding as soon as the seller mails it. And I always get the question in the class, well, what if it gets lost in the mail? I get it. I don't know why. Well, I do know why this is the law. And the reason why this is the law is, let's say the buyer changes their mind and then says, oh, I never got it, right? They can't do that because as soon as the seller mails it, then it is considered received. Now, do we negotiate through the mail in 2026? No, we do not. We do things like email. That's pretty much all we do now. Yes, you might have a courier for certain types of documents. I guess theoretically you could have a fax machine. But there is this concept of constructive communication. And so the thing with constructive communication is, as soon as it is sent, it is considered received and it is binding. So once the seller takes a positive action, so does something to communicate their acceptance, we have a binding contract. And again, that concept is called constructive communication. That is constructive communication. And the question that I see a lot of textbooks have in like their final is that the seller is mailing it back to the buyer. And when does that contract become a contract? And it becomes a contract as soon as the seller puts it in the mail due to constructive communication. Due to constructive communication. All right, I'm going to go over one other thing just because I want us to make sure that we know. Present all offers. Okay. One of the things that that I don't agree with is some agents will just tell people it's under contract when you call about the property. And granted, I don't want you to lie to me, but also don't just cancel the showing because it's under contract. Unless your seller doesn't want any more showings. But I always counsel my sellers to allow as many showings as possible, even if we're under contract, because contracts fall through all the time. Okay? Contracts fall through all the time, and I would much rather have a backup contract, not a backup offer, a backup contract, so that if the first one falls through, we're already under contract on the second one. And when I'm working with a buyer, like if my buyer's in love with the house, then I don't mind doing a backup contract. Now, I know a lot of agents don't want to do a backup contract because it's quote unquote a waste of time. And I agree that it can be a waste of time for, I would say, 80 or 90% of the time. And that 10 to 20% of the time when stuff falls through and your buyer gets a chance on a property that they would have not gotten if you refused to write the offer, man, it makes it worth it, right? It makes it worth it. All right, so I'm just going to go over one quick situation that I had. I had a seller and we had an investor. The investor sends the offer to the seller. And we got a ton of offers. This investor's offer was the best realistic one, and it was at $115,000. The property needed a lot of work. My seller had used it as she was what we called an involuntary landlord. Basically, the market had pulled back while she owned the property and owed money on it, and so she just rented it out in order to cover the mortgage payments. And when I talked to her, by the way, she just needed to net right around $96,000, if I remember correctly. That's what she needed to net after any closing costs, seller concessions, and any real estate agent commissions. Well, the investor actually exceeded due diligence and sent over, once they had their inspector go out, they sent over an amendment to change the price from $115,000 to $100,000. Okay. Now, in the meantime, we'd gotten a second person, and this was going to be an owner occupant. Okay. But it was a contractor, and he was paying cash. And by the way, this property probably couldn't have been financed at the time because it needed too many repairs. And lenders often will not finance a property that needs repairs, especially if it's not some sort of a rehab loan. Okay. Now, this guy put in an offer for $125,000, no contingencies. And wouldn't you know it, this darn offer came in the day after we went under contract with this guy. Now, if he just showed up to closing, we would have to take that $115,000 because we're under contract. But he sent over $100,000, and my seller says, no. That's a big fat no. A couple days later, the investor goes up to $107,000. Again, $8,000 less than their contract, and my seller says no. But now it's getting a little bit dicey. And the reason is because this guy is getting frustrated because he doesn't have first position. He has a backup contract, but he's waiting for this deal to fall out. And he basically says, hey guys, if I don't get first position on the contract in the next 2 days, I'm going to terminate the contract and go look for something else, which he had the legal right to do. Now, this person had $1,000 in earnest money. And legally, this earnest money should have gone back to my seller. But here's the deal. The investor could have kept us tied up in the transaction for another 2 weeks. I did not tell the investor that we had this offer. And the reason why I did not tell that side that we had this offer is because I wanted them to terminate. And if I say, well, I've got this person that's willing to pay $125,000, they're going to probably just go to closing at the $115,000. And so we preferred that they terminate. But my client was really hung up on the fact that they were past their due diligence and she should be getting that $1,000. And what I ended up having to talk to her about is, look, I completely understand. And I'm frustrated with this person too. And let's just see if they'll do a mutual termination if we can give them their $1,000 back so we can move forward with the $125,000, right? Because they can keep us tied up in this contract for another 2 weeks. We'll lose this buyer. And if this person doesn't close at the $115,000, who knows what we'll be starting over, and who knows what we'll get the next time around, right? Now, here's the deal. We were able to get them to cancel the contract. We mutually terminated the contract by giving them their $1,000 back. They went away. We closed on this one, and my client sacrificed $1,000 that she rightfully, legally had a claim to, but she sacrificed that $1,000 to make $10,000 more than the most she was going to make over here, right? So that's like a 10-to-1 return. So you do that every time. Now, the interesting thing is, when you are in this business, you are negotiating pride more than price. And over here, it's the principle of the matter. And again, I completely get it because I get frustrated by those things too. But I don't want to let the principle of the matter get in the way of $10,000. And they still might not have closed here. And yes, she would have gotten that $1,000, but we would have lost the much better offer and we would have been starting over, and who knows what we would have gotten. Now, the other thing that I want to say is she was willing to move forward with any offer that netted her $96,000. The $115,000 was well above that even after paying the commission. But even the 107 was above that. So if I wasn't seeking out backup offers, then my client would have probably taken that 107 because it would have gotten her out from underneath the house and she didn't have anything better. And she would have gotten more than her $96,000. She would have netted like just under 100,000 if I remember correctly. And that's why when I'm on the sell side, let's always get a backup offer. And if the backup offer is less than what my, basically if the backup offer is less than what the primary contract is, then I try to use that as leverage to keep the first buyer in the contract by letting them know, well, we do have a backup offer, but if the second contract is more than the first contract, then I just have my seller say no to every request to hopefully get them to terminate so we can move on with the higher offer. Okay. All right. So just wanted to cover some more about contracts. I'm going to be uploading a couple videos to the channel. If you saw the overview on contracts, and then this is basically the creation of a contract, trying to make sure you guys get all of these things down pat. And I'll be uploading more things to the channel as we go along, at least one video per week. Thank you for tuning in. Oh no. Okay.